They remain today the world's largest state sponsor of terror. I regret that the Biden administration has chosen to go back to a model of appeasement with Iran, giving them money, resources, wealth, capabilities. You can see what they're doing. They're allowing drones to travel to Ukraine and kill Ukrainian civilians. These are bad folks. We were serious about defending not only the things that matter to America, but our Israeli partners as well, and we were pretty darn effective.
Welcome to the Rosenberg Report. We've got an exclusive interview tonight with Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, former Secretary of State, and a good man, a strong follower of Jesus Christ. And look, we're going to get into a series of questions. And Mr. Secretary, I'm very grateful for your time. I loved your book. And the fascinating thing about it is you and I met because of books. You had invited me up to your office on Capitol Hill when you were a congressman because you were starting to read some of my political thrillers. And now you have written it could be a novel, but the amazing thing about Never Give an Inch is that it's all true. And I want to get right into it. But first of all, it's great to see you.
Joel, thanks for having me on today. And I had forgotten that way we were introduced, and we've had a lifelong love of reading and writing. And I was really, really happy to be able to write and tell the story in Never Give an Inch of 4 years of hard work on behalf of America. And I've gotten some feedback. Folks find it fun and interesting, but also insightful. And Joel, and you know it in this way, right? The things that really matter in the world often run through the most senior places in Washington, D.C., and I was blessed to have the privilege to serve for those 4 years.
Well, I'm grateful that you did, and I got to tell you, the book is a very compelling read. I highly recommend it. It is the book of the month on our All Israel News website. Let me get right into it, but let me start with a point that you make in the book. On the wall of the CIA headquarters that you ran is the very famous Bible verse, chiseled in granite, the words of Jesus, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And chapter 9, you really start to open up about how you came to faith in Jesus Christ. So let's start there. How did you come to faith in Christ? And how did you make your walk with Christ a central element in carrying out two of the most difficult jobs in the world to do well?
Well, Joel, I grew up, I went to Sunday school from time to time. My parents would take me, but it was an important part of me. My fault, not anyone else's. But when I was a young cadet at West Point, there were two folks just a year ahead of me, or 2 years ahead of me, I think one of them. And they invited me to what I didn't know at the time was a Bible study. I thought it was just cookies and lemonade. And so I was all in.
Right.
But they taught me to read the Bible. They taught me to read the Bible. They taught me about faith. And truly, from just shortly after that first time I went to meet with them, I came to understand how to read the Bible, how to know Jesus Christ, and it's been an important part of my life. I was the Secretary of State for the United States and the Director of CIA for the United States, but I always kept the Lord in my heart, knowing that no matter how hard the problem set, no matter how difficult, there was somebody bigger than me. There was something bigger in life that I needed to make sure and take care of and address appropriately. And I tried to do that every day. In the Trump administration, we had a central understanding of religious freedom around the world, not just for Christians, but for Jews and Muslims and people of every faith. It was at the center of how we thought about the world because we knew the world was safer when people had the basic right to worship in the way they chose.
Well, I love that about you, Mr. Secretary. When we first met, when you were in Congress, that faith was a big part of our opening conversation. And then literally every single time you and I met or communicated, certainly when we met, you were giving a big religious freedom conversation among other elements in your speech in Cairo. And of course, even in your 7th floor office there at the State Department, which I had literally never come to the State Department until you became Secretary. Why would anyone let me in? But faith was a critical element. And it brought up another point from your book. First of all, you're the only national security high-level official that lasted the whole 4 years. And during that time, which, by the way, congratulations, but during that time, you came to Israel 6 times. And in chapter 13, you described standing in front of the Western Wall to pray alongside Prime Minister Netanyahu, Ambassador David Friedman, both good friends. And you described that moment as one of the most spiritually powerful experiences of my life. Why? Well, as an evangelical Christian, how do you view the prophetic and spiritual significance of the state of Israel?
First of all, it's not possible for a Christian believer to go to Jerusalem and not see these 3,000 years of history to know that this is the rightful Jewish homeland, right? You can touch it. You can feel it. There's the book that you read lines up with the things that you can see and feel. You're not being gaslit. This is the real history of this place. And for Christians and for people of many faiths, this is the city of peace. Jerusalem is so special. And to get to go there when I was had this civic duty as a Secretary of State and be there with the current leader of the nation of Israel and travel there with the U.S. ambassador who spent his life working on the protection of Jews and Christians all around the world. It was a moment where those of us of faith couldn't possibly be moved, and you hoped that the world would see it for what it was, not a political stunt, but aimed at reminding all of us of the basic decency and goodness that comes from a commitment to faith. And those of us who do our best every day, and we don't always get it right, do our best every day to preserve faith opportunities for those around the world. Well, it was really quite a moment.
So are you going to run for president? Let's just put it on the line.
Joel, I don't know the answer to that question. You've met Susan, my wife. We are trying to figure our way through this. We are praying. We're doing the things one might do to get ready to make the case. Whether we'll decide to run for office, we're still a few months out from knowing for sure.
Well, talk about your relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's back. You were very instrumental, both at CIA and, of course, at State, in helping Israel make peace with 4 Arab countries, and, of course, dealing with the Iran threat. So first, I want you to talk about what do we need to know about Netanyahu that many people don't know, that the man that you got to know, and also why has the Iranian regime decided to bless you with a threat of assassination? What you got to take us in, because this threat is not just to Israel, it's to the United States also, and to you personally.
Well, Joel, there's a lot to unpack there. Your first question was my relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was a fantastic relationship. Obviously, the relationship in first instance is between the United States and the nation of Israel, but it's about people too. And so I had this opportunity, first as CIA director. I'd met him when I was in Congress, actually, to spend a lot of time with him working on some of the most complex problems that have plagued the Middle East and the world for decades and decades. We had a central understanding of the way forward. It wasn't the way forward that had been chosen by previous American administrations and, frankly, previous Israeli administrations as well. We wanted to do right by the people that lived in Judea and Samaria of every faith, but we weren't going to let terrorist Abu Mazen hold up peace in the region. And so we began to develop a series of ideas. We collectively, Secretary Mnuchin, Jared Kushner, me, Ambassador Friedman, the whole Israeli national security establishment, and then to work with these Arab Gulf states to make the case that their best interest was served by making peace with Israel. It depended upon, in the first moment, an America that was prepared to push back against the Islamic regime in Iran. And so we did that. So we made close partnerships in my time as CIA with Mossad, in my time as the Secretary of State with the Prime Minister, and then put the maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Those two things gave the Arab states the confidence to say, we think that this is the right time to make peace with Israel. As for the Iranians, they remain today the world's largest state sponsor of terror. I regret that the Biden administration has chosen to go back to a model of appeasement with Iran, giving them money, resources, wealth, capabilities. You can see what they're doing. They're allowing drones to travel to Ukraine and kill Ukrainian civilians. These are bad folks. We were serious about defending not only the things that matter to America, but our Israeli partners as well, and we were pretty darn effective.
Certainly were, and as I've sat down with United Arab Emirates Crown Prince, now President Mohammed bin Zayed, Saudi Crown Prince, heir to the throne, Mohammed bin Salman, and others that you know much better than me. But for me, even sitting with them and they're talking about their appreciation for you, for President Trump, for Vice President Pence and Jared Kushner and the team, both on Iran and on Israel, really quite fascinating. This has been a game changer in this region. But back to Iran, MBS told me on the record that he considers the supreme leader of Iran the next Hitler, the new Hitler. So how close would you assess Tehran is to getting the bomb? And I don't see Biden doing anything about it for the next 2 years. Is there a risk that Iran makes a breakout in these next 2 years to getting the bomb, knowing or sensing that Biden might not do anything about it? And then what does Netanyahu do?
Joel, there is a risk. There's no doubt that the Iranians likely see the Biden administration as less prepared to take risks in order to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon, not just we often talk about the enrichment capacity, but also a program, the capability to actually deliver that fissile material through a weapon system. So there is some risk they'll try to, at the end of the Biden administration, move to break out as quickly as they can. I hope that's wrong. I hope they recognize that the world's not going to stand for that. Certainly the Israelis are not going to permit them to have a nuclear weapon. And I hope that the Iranians believe that when the Israelis make that decision, that the Americans will be with them and support them and provide the things that are needed collectively to make sure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. It is not just an Israeli problem. It is a problem for the Gulf Arab states. It is a problem for Africa. It is a problem for the United States of America. A nuclear-armed Iran is a global threat at the scale we haven't seen in that region because we've managed to keep nuclear weapons out of that state-sponsored terror's hands.
How close do you think Iran is at this point, and do the next 2 years become perhaps the most dangerous window that we've been in a while?
Joel, too close. We've seen the intelligence community publicly state that we're talking about a number of months if they began to move in a brisk way. My worry when I was CIA director and as Secretary of State is about what it is we may not know. Some gap that we have in collection observation, that they may have a program, much as they did in the Ahmad program back in 2003, a program that we are not collectively aware of the scale, that it's been dispersed in ways that we can't see. I am confident that we know a lot about this, that if we had determined leadership in Washington, D.C., that we could actually push back and delay their capability to get this and then give the Iranian people the opportunity to direct a leadership inside of Iran that would change course. You joked a bit about the fact that there's a bounty on my head, that the Iranians are trying to kill me. It's true.
I wasn't joking. I was just saying. No, it's very, very serious.
No, they're trying to kill other Americans too. They've conducted assassination campaigns in Europe. They tried to kill the Saudi ambassador here in Washington, D.C. This is a regime that does not value human life. And so we can see that both outside of the country and what they do to their own people. We need to support the Iranian people so that in the end, this is the transition that will be made, such as the Iranian people can have a set of leaders that want to be part of the world, not hostile to it, not a theocracy and kleptocracy run by the IRGC, a decent government trying to engage in a way that reflects well on the people of Iran.
I remember sitting with you and President Trump, then National Security Advisor John Bolton, and of course, Vice President Pence in the Oval Office. And I was talking to the president, as you'll recall, about my novel then, The Persian Gamble. And he said, well, what's that about? I said, what if Iran takes the money that Biden and Obama gave them and goes try to buy a half dozen nuclear warheads off the shelf? And he said, well, that's a terrifying premise. I said, he goes, how do you know they're not trying to do that already? I said, well, I'm hoping that the men in this room, yourself including, Mr. President, are doing everything you can every day to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, the problem is he's not there. And the man who's in the room, in the seat, I don't have a lot of confidence in him. And from your book, I'm guessing you don't either. Okay, you know my family escaped then as Orthodox Jews out of Russia. I have to turn to Russia. You describe Vladimir Putin in the book as a wolf, as a shark, as a madman, as a man, quote, on a messianic quest to restore Russia's lost Soviet-era power. All right, so how do you really feel about it, Mr. Secretary? Talk to us about what we need to know about Vladimir Putin and how what's going on in Ukraine seems to have unmasked a man that most people in the world seem baffled that he did this.
Joel, I described him in very much that way. I've also said, and I think I said in the book, don't underestimate his capacity to dominate the Russian people and to continue on his quest, as you described it as messianic, his quest for, quote, greater Russia, end of quote. We shouldn't underestimate that. Even though to date they have failed at that, he's not going to give up. And that means that Europe needs to do more. We're going to have to continue to do more. I saw Vladimir Putin a handful of times. I spent enough time with him to know he is determined. He's going to stay at this. Whether there are hundreds of thousands of Russians killed and he loses his generals, those are things that are just steps along the way towards his vision for restoring greater Russia. And so the resolution of this is going to require not only enormous capabilities that are put into Ukraine by the Europeans, but an America that is prepared to make sure that we get a security architecture in the aftermath of this when it ends. And I hope it ends as quickly as possible. And the more we provide collectively to Ukraine, the quicker this will end. when this ends, we need to make sure that we have a structure that lasts. Maybe nothing's permanent, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, not 18 months. And we need a president in the White House that understands the American power to deter adversaries, and this president failed at that.
What if a radical Islamist terror mastermind decided to take advantage of the Biden administration's utter dereliction of duty to safeguard America's borders? What if a man who called himself Abu Nakba, the father of catastrophe, decided to send teams of terrorists through secret tunnels on America's southern border with Mexico, as well as across America's northern border with Canada, hell-bent on unleashing mass casualty attacks 100 times worse than 9/11? That's the premise of my new political thriller, The Libyan Diversion, which releases on May 16th. And it's an idea I got from former CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Now, one of the great things about being friends with a former director of the CIA is that there is always a chance that he'll prove to be a treasure trove of terrifying ideas for new political thrillers. And I absolutely have to credit Mike Pompeo with the central premise, the central driving force of The Libyan Diversion. The year was 2021, and it was the weekend of September 11th. And I was interviewing the former CIA Director and Secretary of State at an event I was hosting at the Museum of the Bible in Washington. I was asking him a wide range of questions about threats posed by Russia, Iran, China, and other enemies. And I asked him this question: are there any other threats that keep you up at night? Threats that maybe we haven't talked about this evening? And he said yes. He was really worried about what he called ungoverned spaces in places like Mexico. When I pressed him to explain, he said that there are now large swaths of territory in northern Mexico along the southern U.S. border that are so dominated by drug cartels, human traffickers, and other criminal enterprises that the Mexican government has essentially given up trying to control them. It's there, he told me, that he fears that terrorists from the Middle East and elsewhere could try to sneak into the United States and do incalculable harm. Now, that was a chilling threat, a chilling premise, and the more I thought about it in the weeks ahead, the more I decided it had to be the driving central premise of The Libyan Diversion. The novel is the fifth in a series of thrillers that I've been writing that center on a character named Marcus Riker, a former Marine, a former U.S. Secret Service agent. He's now a clandestine officer for the CIA. And Riker has been involved in thwarting a series of horrific terrorist attacks against the United States, against Israel, and against our Arab allies in the first 4 books in the series. Now, in this book, The Libyan Diversion, Marcus Riker is hunting down a ruthless, bloodthirsty terror mastermind who goes by the nom de guerre Abu Nakba. Now, Abu Nakba, which means the father of catastrophe, his mother was a Palestinian from Gaza, but his father was a radical Islamist from Libya. And that's why the CIA has nicknamed him the Libyan. Now, after enormous effort in the first few books, Riker now believes he's located this terrorist's headquarters and urges the American president to order a massive airstrike. The president does, but the intelligence seems to be wrong. It's a trick, a diversion, and it's all designed to pull Riker and his team deep into ungoverned spaces in the Middle East, while actually sending terrorists into the United States through ungoverned spaces in Mexico. And unless Marcus Riker can figure out exactly what's happening and get his team back to America fast, a whole lot of people are going to die. That's The Libyan Diversion. It releases on May 16th, and you can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you love to buy books. And I have to give credit to my guest, Mike Pompeo.